Hi everyone. You know you're in Montreal when you get your water given to you in jars. There's no room on the table for it, so we're going to have to go dry mouth. Right, so thanks for the introduction. Great to be here. I'm, I guess, what they call a speculative architect. What that means is that I don't design buildings, but instead I work between documentary and fiction to tell stories about the global and urban implications of new technologies. I kind of do those stories as storytelling performances rather than, you're not going to see a PowerPoint today. If the PowerPoint fans in the room, sorry to disappoint you. Rather, what I wanted to do was, I guess, expand the conversation. Normally when we talk about future or we talk about digital technologies at events like this, we fetishize the shiny, luminous things that we can make with these technologies, or you have someone like Elon Musk standing on the stage talking about how the future is going to be great and technology is going to solve all our problems. We rarely kind of go behind the screen to look at the landscapes, the systems, and the people that actually are a fundamental part in producing those futures, or certainly producing those technologies. So, to kind of frame the conversation around the future, I wanted to talk about an alternative future, in many ways, an alternative present that we don't normally get into. And we're going to do it through the lens of this story, because really, for the most part, what we do is borrow from the techniques of film, fiction, and performance in order to animate these scenarios, in order to animate these futures for audiences that don't normally show up to rooms like this one. And these mediums, these stories, sort of transcend disciplinary boundaries and connect to people through really powerful and meaningful ways, hopefully. Could we kill the lights? Nope. Oh. Let's do something. Here we go. So today what I'm going to try and do is narrate a series of stories and myths of what you might describe as the post-Anthropocene. So we're going to go on a tour through a collection of sites, documented moments and vignettes of a new city. A city of the post-Anthropocene digital world that for today we're going to call City Everywhere. So in the landscape of City Everywhere, there is no city and country, no center and periphery, but there's just this continuous city of technology stretched across the planet. I want to talk to you about a selection of tales from the dark side of technology, an atlas of geographies and gadgets and objects that might form a portrait of this emerging city. I like to think of it as a kind of city symphony, but one that's stitched together from documentary footage of real sites that we've visited with unknown fields, but also short fragments of speculative film projects that I develop out of those conditions with my own urban futures think tank. So we're going to see this city everywhere from the back seat of a driverless taxi, and we're going to head off on safari, and the city operating system is going to ride shotgun with us. And we're going to travel together through an atlas of sites, and we're going to travel from the edges of this city to see where our contemporary technologies begin their lives, and then move into the core of that city center to see ourselves and the strange creatures that we've become. So here we are in our driverless taxi. And the smart city is sitting beside us, and it smells of hard drives and fiber optics and Red Bull soda. And the electric motor hums and we rumble on quietly. And the city has invited us on a road trip across its technological skin. It's looking forward to showing us around to visit the sites and structures made for and by its machines. Sites of this planetary-scaled city where nothing has escaped, and we're going to trace the edges, glitches, and anomalies to see where these often invisible machines bubble to the surface to condense into the landscapes and architectures and natures of our emerging world. To begin, the city takes us back to the beginning of the beginning, it says, seconds from zero, when 13.8 billion years ago, the creation story of lithium, a fundamental component in all our technologies, begins. And from the spark of a big bang to the flicker of an electron jumping from the battery in our phone, it was there at the dawn of time. And in this vast cloud of swirling cosmic matter, gravity, and violent collapse, it gave shape to the sphere of the Earth, and embedded within it the traces of lithium. And here we drive along the azure shores of the city's energy pools, through Chile and Bolivia, a land no longer of an indigenous population, but of evaporation ponds of the world's largest lithium mines. So this is the landscape behind the scenes of all the batteries that power our technologies. 70% of the world's lithium is here, the city says. And in a way you can't see it on the desperately flat horizon or access it by any public road. Its mystery is protected by its isolation. But through the eyes of a drone following us in our taxi, we see the technology is splayed out before us. Because lithium development is not mining through extraction, but through evaporation. And a tessellated ocean of evaporation ponds unfolds where each shift in hue signals a rising concentration of lithium salts. And from above the earth, the ground comes alive with the colors of lithium electricity. And another world away, on a stage in California, Elon Musk, the tech evangelist and entrepreneur, proclaims his vision for a green future, a world where everything will be solar in 20 years. But like most Silicon Valley preachers, he's presenting a seductive future, a hopeful future, but at the same time a decidedly uncomplicated one. Because if Elon Musk wants to enact this future, he literally must buy Bolivia and evolve it as the new Dubai. Because if the future is electric, if the future is Elon Musk and his Tesla-fueled dreams, then the future is buried here, beneath the salt flats. And we keep on driving. And we see from a clearing in the point cloud mist the cavernous landscapes of our ephemeral technologies. And it's in these massive mining excavations scattered on the edge of the world that our city everywhere begins and ends its life. And we each have a bit of the gold or aluminium from these sites in the technologies in our pockets, charged and quietly vibrating. And in this context, Aboriginal Dreamtime narratives speak of a time when the ground was soft and creation beings shaped mountains and rivers. When a rainbow serpent slinked across the ground to create a river, or a wild dog came to rest to form a mountain. And now, as the lights of the city wash out the sky, the songlines walked by these ancestral spirits are sung anew, with the tracks laid down by the beasts of the mining industry. And the dreaming landscape that embodies the creation stories of Aboriginal Australians is now overlaid with the vast infrastructure of resource speculation and financial fiction. And here, geological survey trains track back and forth, laser scanning the earth, searching for topographic anomalies that indicate pockets of undiscovered minerals in the ground. And the digital models of these landscapes are now linked live to the fluctuations of metal prices on the stock market. as explosive diggers and drills have replaced the slow erosion of rivers and earthquakes, here we are scoring our economy into the archaeological record, a chronicle of the digital permutations that drive the modern world. And in the landscape, we see vehicles that are just like ours, that no longer have drivers, but that are just systems. And mining trucks rumble up mountains and carve soil along GPS trails generated by the satellites above. And as we drive deeper into the dust, we watch on from the window and we see the rhythms of the human conveyor belts in Madagascar. One of the planet's most precious ecological treasures is now home to one of its poorest nations, and here it raises difficult questions about the relationship between technology, necessity, and luxury. And as the beat drops, and the stage lights strobe and a pop star flashes their designer bling for the camera in a flurry of choreographed dance moves, another world away here, in a hole in the ground in the Wild West mining town of Ilikaka, Madagascar, another choreography of bodies moves in rhythm to dig dirt by hand out of a gemstone mine. The majority of the world's sapphires are pulled out of the ground of the human conveyor belts of Madagascar's gem fields. For such a remote island, it contains an extraordinary amount of high-value resources. Precious gems were deposited here by an ancient river that once flowed across Africa before a tectonic shift ripped it from the mainland to form the island of Madagascar, and stones collected in a pocket along the twists and turns of a riverbed, resting patiently beneath 20 meters of sand in the future boomtown of Ilikaka. And hidden amidst political uncertainty, the island's fragile, unique ecology is being smuggled out illegally, boat by boat, gem by gem. And red tortoises leave in rucksacks, and forests are carved into million-dollar rosewood beds to be sold in China, and precious stones are shoveled from the earth and smuggled onto the stage in pop star bling. And in these illegal mines, it's cheaper to pay 20 men in rice than it is to maintain and fuel a mechanical conveyor belt. And a hidden black market supply chain connects two choreographies, from these lawless mine sites to the jewelry stores, music videos, and celebrity red carpets across the ocean. So for the jewelry of City Everywhere, we use the amount of rice the human conveyor belt consumes in a day to manufacture a precious stone that embodies the systems through which these worlds are intimately and profoundly connected. The red Madagascan rice grown endemically on this island is a staple food of the miners and has been collected locally and shipped to gem specialists for carbon analysis. And by subjecting the rice to extreme heat and pressure in the lab, we're able to form a single synthetic stone encoded with the sum of the human conveyor belt's labor. And after manufacture, the gemstone has been set into a gold tooth, ready for that million-dollar smile and that outrageous lyric. And from kilojoules to carats to the nightclub, in the glare of this cheeky gold grin, we see the cost of luxury, of beauty, of a daily allowance of rice, of 20 men shoveling at the bottom of a hole. It glistens, and in the light and mirrored facets of the diamond, we see ourselves. And we get back in our taxi. And we keep on driving and we continue to follow the breadcrumbs of technology, and we arrive at a village organized around metals and hardware components. And here we see another group of villagers buried not by soil, but by the collected piles of e-waste gathered in their houses. And these mines of discarded technology surround their living, sleeping, and eating spaces. And they mine their domestic landscapes for lead, germanium, gallium, tin, nickel, and copper. and next to the pottled noodles simmers the acid bath, dissolving circuit wafers, separating metals, and flavoring soup. And close by, a driverless taxi rolls up to the shores of the radioactive lake in Inner Mongolia that sits beside the world's largest rare earth mineral refinery. And we take a selfie with our phones, and we see our reflection in the mirrored screen, because the material to polish its glass and run its software produces this very lake. And collapsed together in a single luminous surface, we see ourselves in this black, black earth. And from this sludge, we've made a vase for the city OS. To thank it for showing us around, it's a set of vases made for the amount of, and made for and from the amount of waste created in the production of 3 objects: an iPhone, a laptop, and a Tesla electric car battery. It's a new material aesthetic for the technologies born of the earth. It's a Ming vase for the city everywhere generation. And the city now takes us to see where all these raw materials are refined and shapes into the familiar objects that fill our lives. Almost all of the world's Christmas decorations are made here, it says. That tree lighting up your lounge, those decorations hanging from the ceiling, that novelty stocking filler is all made here. And made by these human machines of the city, orchestrated around efficiency algorithms. In a way, these are the real robots of our new landscapes of technology, where the body is matched in speed to the conveyor belt that turns in front of it. And here we find 90% of the world's electronics. And we brand our technologies with terms like cloud, air, and featherweight. But in reality, they're violently wrenched from the earth. And as our personal electronics tend towards the invisible, they conjure in their shadows an undeniably visible grey mountain, a 1 kilometer deep pit, a 10 square kilometer radioactive tailings lake, all a counterweight to the apparent immateriality of computing, communications, and electric energy. And the infrastructures of my digital world have extraordinary implications on material experience, the city says. These are the architectures behind the screen and beyond the fog of the smart city cloud. These are the physical outputs of our digital engagement with the world. But here in this landscape, in this city everywhere, we can start to imagine redesigning our gadgets, not based on how they slide into our pockets or feel in our hand, but perhaps for the networks that they set in motion, or the economic resources they might distribute. What could the alternative design criteria be for supply chain design if it weren't engineered around cheap labor costs and material availability? And in the same area of the city, a camera flashes and a model pouts and catches the eye on the catwalk. Because here, fast fashion's rolling tide dumps mountains of cheap clothing, objects of desire, worn for one wild night and destined to be discarded. And now in our taxi we pick at a loose thread on the garment we are wearing and we unravel it across continents, from wardrobe to warehouse, from factory to field, in search of the landscapes behind our runway dreams and street blue jeans. Because before we wear them, our clothes make journeys just like our electronics of tens of thousands of miles in their process of production, making textiles the most globalized industry on the planet. And the byproduct of this pace and scale of production is the destruction of the very thing that brought it into being. And here we meet the last generation of master weavers, a group whose skills will now die with them. The apprentices that they would once train now man the rumbling mechanized looms of global fashion, raw cotton plugging their ears, deaf to the din of the world around them. And on our tour, we visit the last real gold thread maker, an alchemist, lovingly tweaking the machine his grandfather made, resisting the move to synthetic, cheap and fake yarns used by all the other companies around him. And spanning from fashion victim to victims of fashion for the cloth of city everywhere, we weave a collaborative textile with the last gold thread maker and one of the last true master weavers in Varanasi. And audio from a series of interviews with these endangered craftspeople, and the sound of their looms is translated into this binary pattern and woven into the cloth. And the textile becomes an archive, encoded with the skills and stories of a dying craft, and woven from the same hands that it's trying to remember. And to make the thread for the textile, we follow the container ships that bring fast fashion to our shores all the way to their death, where after 25 years they return to India and Bangladesh to be broken up and salvaged in the shipbreaking yards. And we collected fragments of this raw steel from the Bangladeshi shores, cut from the rusting carcass of the dead ships, to form the core of the gold thread. It's a textile archive born from the skeletons of the industry that brought it into being. And the cloth is draped across a young Indian textile walker, and she walks slowly on a sacred procession from her home village amongst the cotton fields to the huge mills and factories of the vast textile supply chain where she works. And she walks across city everywhere, gradually wrapped in the glistening gold textile as it bears witness to a series of transformations like weaving, dyeing, sewing, and pressing. And her journey suggests the walk along the fashion catwalk and the path our disposable fashion takes in its global production, and the path so many women like her have taken in moving from village to factory to city. And her journey ends as she's completely cocooned, standing at the huge container port amongst the mega container ships that will soon export her to the West. Because as we start to see on City Everywhere, this place cannot be described as a single point on the map anymore. Our technologies cast shadows across the earth. And now as we drive, we pack up all the objects and materials produced in these sites on its edges, and we send them off in ships around the world. This is the computer-controlled container fleet of the mega shipping industry that now navigates autonomously based on GPS satellites. And the ship captain and the portside crane operator have now been made obsolete. And as we keep on traveling in the ship, we soon move to what will become the busiest shipping lane on the planet, where the cities of the Arctic coast now stand empty. They're soon filled with the unmanned beasts of global trade. As the ice melts, the shipping lanes are opened up, and a lone engineer and her dog now head back from a maintenance run, like a lighthouse keeper. Just her, the horizon, and the creaking cranes, where her body is repurposed as a component in the landscape-scaled robot that stacks the containers, ready for transport, bringing our goods all the way home. And as we travel across this pixel sea, we're explorers in this strange new land, and the City OS tells the tall, salty tale of one of its floating artifacts.
Island mystery that was in the Sydney Morning Herald. Sandy Island was actually found on the Google Earth.
And just off the coast of the city is Sandy Island, as the city says. It's a collection of dark pixels, GPS coordinates, hyperlinks, and stories. It was originally charted by the whaling ship Velocity back in 1876, and the island has long been what's called an evidence-doubtful landmass. It's a place that was perhaps originally recorded to be a trap that might support a map's copyright, or a mislabeled pile of volcanically ejected pumice that was seen drifting on the horizon. But whatever it was, this cartographic apparition remained visible in Google Earth models of the city until an Australian research vessel confirmed its non-existence during a 2012 expedition to survey the ocean floor. But up until that point, to a world of Google explorers and hyperlink adventurers, Sandy Island was just as real as any other place they visited online. And in City Everywhere, when the places and spaces exist solely in the mediums through which we experience them, then they become just as real as any physical location. When it's machines that do the looking, these digital geographies become new and occupiable sites. Sites like this one, where our ship and our taxi now pulls up to the shores of the Amazon fulfillment center. And stretching out before us is the endless shelves and storage bins. And this is where we keep, everything, says the city. And the Amazon bookshelves are stacked based on a complex sorting algorithm that's engineered around sales frequencies and buying patterns. And we watch as Amazon robots rush through the stacks, navigating from book to book, filling orders by following the most efficient route generated for them by their navigational programming. And this is the library of City Everywhere, that's not organized around the Dewey Decimal System, but by buying habits and aggregated data sets. It's a library that isn't organized for us, but organized around algo logics and inhabited by bodies as machines. And we follow the Amazon Prime drone that's zipping about above us. And drifting above this sea of neon haze, the drones have become as ubiquitous as pigeons. And we customize our drones like we once did our phones, and they follow us around, always with a smile and fluffy ears and 16mm propeller blades. And the air is filled with the digital confetti of our every desire, and the skin of the city is warm, freckled with 1,000 lights, and the traffic lights flock at rush hour. And our packages rain down in an Amazon hailstorm. And the rumble of drone propellers have become a new natural soundscape to this city of a new generation. And they deliver our pizzas. Hot dogs, stuffed crusts is how we like them in City Everywhere. And all the dogs in the city are walked by drones now, the city says. Think of the time saving, it smiles. And a network of drones now monitor the wayward youth of a London council estate. And we watch on as a young girl has hacked and decorated her own drone and uses it to pass notes to her boyfriend trapped in the tower opposite. And like kids passing notes in an old-fashioned classroom, they scribble messages on the drone and they send it back and forth between the towers. And in this near-future city, drones form both agents of state surveillance, but also become co-opted as the aerial vehicles through which two teenagers might fall in love. And another drone, armed just with a dildo, disrupts a Russian parliamentary session. And another zips overhead, armed with a different kind of cylindrical device, en route to attack a village in a country half a world away. And we're getting closer to the sites of the city where we find ourselves. And our taxi takes us to the residential districts, to the Samsung towers. And we put our ears to the cool, beveled aluminium door of one of the apartments and we listen to a conversation inside. Through the door we hear the story of another writer, Tim Morn, He tells us about Duri, who drops her Samsung Galaxy SX phone onto the kitchen table. And we hear it chime softly as it makes contact with the paper-thin Samsung Qi Smart Power charging mat. And we hear her scream down the hallway at her husband, raising her voice over the Samsung air conditioner. "Why does the new TV say LG on it?" she says. "Because it's made by LG," he replies. What do you mean? You're trying to get it thrown out?" she yells. "Our lease is up for review in 3 months, and you bought an LG TV into a Samsung housing block. What the hell are the neighbors gonna say?" she says. And the city just shrugs and it glares at us with a million sensor eyes. And we keep on moving to another apartment.
A South Korean woman got a rude awakening when she left her robot vacuum to do the cleaning while she took a nap. The vacuum cleaner reportedly mistook the woman for dust, locked onto her hair and tried to suck it up. The vacuum suction was far from gentle, and wrenched the woman from her slumber. The woman's hair then became entangled in the cleaning device. The woman, who has not been named, was unable to free herself and called the fire department with a desperate rescue plea.
And we keep on walking to another apartment, and inside we hear a story of Daniel Corral, who scanned the label on a Heinz ketchup bottle to read about the latest recipe promotion. But the QR code instead directed him to German porn site Fundorado. And in our domestic spaces and living spaces, we're surrounded by living objects now that listen, watch, and talk back. And to see where they live, the city takes us to the beating, purring, whirring heart of the city. And now we drive along the aisles of Facebook machines, past all of our messages, photos, inane chatter, hopes, dreams, desires, and darkest fears. And here the electric car motor gives way to the whir of cooling fans. It's not a grand cathedral, it's not a great library, but at a time when our collective history is digital, this is our generation's cultural legacy. And perhaps in these rooms we will soon write soliloquies for the server aisles like we once did for rolling hills. And couples steam up the car windows, parked in artificial moonlight of vast data complexes. And power plant fog hangs heavy in the air. And hidden within the server stacks, the city wants to take us to visit the render lands and the data farms. And we drive on through the Indian quarter of the city. Because in the design studios of the West, architects and directors sketch out their designs for future cities. And in India, across the other side of the planet, a massive anonymous workforce turn these wireframe worlds into the high-fidelity digital architectures of developer renderings, video games, and Hollywood blockbusters. This is Prakash, the city says, a render farm worker, making and shaping the digital worlds we all inhabit. And Prakash has fallen in love with the digital model of a beautiful Hollywood actress after spending 14 hours a day endlessly rotoscoping, rendering, and compositing her into blockbuster films. He has lovingly airbrushed across every pore on her face, every strand of her hair, as he models her 3D superhero silhouette, scene by scene, frame by frame, day by day. And by night, when the fluorescents are switched off and everyone else has gone home, he straps his VR goggles on, and they walk hand in hand through the streets of a city he's collaged together for them. Collaged from scavenged VFX movie models and the leftover 3D game assets that remain on Indian studio hard drives after a production is cancelled. And the digital ephemera of popular culture now fills our physical spaces. And we drive through a utopia that exists in the thickness of the screen. A virtual city that stretches from Los Angeles or Montreal to Bangalore. A world of demolished landmarks, drowned cityscapes, alien invasions, digitally simulated actors, and our own outsourced, pixel-projected futures. And in a way, this is the physical world left behind when everything disappears into the thickness of the lens of Google Glass or Oculus Rift. where modern film studios are now an analogy for the urban spaces of City Everywhere, where we see a new kind of architecture, a new type of ornament that's based on calibration crosshairs and targets, an architecture stripped back to become the scaffolds and infrastructure for a digitally constructed world. And we see an architecture that's lying in wait, ready for the premiere of 1 million animated movies that will illuminate its surface with color and detail. And in a way, this is the future that our technology promises us.
The old-fashioned way. Century 21. John Anderton! Right about now. Escape from it all, Linda Lewis.
John Anderton.
Forget your troubles with Lou.
So when we turn off this augmented world, when we turn off the bespoke billboards of Minority Report's urban spaces, the tailored ads, the navigational prompts, the Tinder profiles and track status updates of our sci-fi cityscapes, we will see a green screen world where everything has become a screen. And we get back in our taxi and we keep on driving and we visit another apartment, an augmented apartment, in a new area of the city where the renderings on developer billboards have become the inhabitable utopias of AR-fueled gentrification. And an agent shows a client around a digital construction site. And we peer through a window of one of the apartments. And here the physical shell becomes a fixer-upper canvas. And building debris and unsightly neighbors are hidden behind the rendered glow of our digital imaginaries. And the occupation of space is now reimagined on individual scales where we're each tuned to our own personal architectural channel. The agent walks in. So, okay, what were you thinking, she says, as a Google image search box appears behind the door. So we've got some lovely 21st century textures. Early Floyd, classic Tilco, or for something really special, I can offer you one of our IKEA packs. Very eclectic, very tasteful, 100% uncustomized, she says. And a daybed winks out of existence to be replaced by a set of side tables in primary colors and a rectangular bookcase. Ooh, a lax, he says. And a billy, he exclaims. The estate agent smiles. Ah, I can see that Sir is a connoisseur. And the agent taps some more buttons and a series of blonde and laminate objects start to appear around the space. A low Japanese-style bed overlays the couch, and he sinks down into it, his eyes gleamed over in a pixel glaze. And we jump back in our taxi, and a dull roar fills the cabin. I wind down a window and we hear an audience in the distance screaming and going crazy. Have you ever been to a Hatsune Miku concert? The city shouts over the noise. She's the pop star of our generation, a pop star of City Everywhere. Because Hatsune is a 3D projection with a larger fan base than most living musicians, and the crowd waves their glow sticks for a digital ghost of the city. Because Hatsune is the first animated pop star, and just like the Kardashians, the Hiltons, the Voggers, and the Instagram stars, she has no physical presence. She's just a media construction and an agglomeration of pixels. And to the beat of Hatsune's hologram, the young ravers dance with explosive contortions as they invent a new choreography that distorts the silhouette and disguises the proportions of their frames so as to evade body detection algorithms used by the city surveillance cameras. And they reimagine their fashion cycles to follow the rate of Moore's law, the latest phone model or software update, rather than a change in season. And they adorn themselves in anti-facial recognition makeup. And they develop new camouflage textiles, a new hoodie that's designed to be invisible to the scanning technologies of the smart city. And the iridescent textiles reflect the light of CCTV laser scanners, creating exuberant glitches and distortions and disturbances in the dataset. Because the eclectic and the imaginary and the have always existed in the slippery spaces between the dataset. And Hello City blinks on the dashboard display. And our journey is at an end, and the system is rebooting. A Hello World program is a computer program that outputs Hello World onto a display. It's a super simple program that's used to verify that a language or system is operating correctly. It's the first words spoken to us by a new system. And Hello World burns onto the screen, announcing itself, telling us that everything is going to be just fine. But in a way, City Everywhere never gave us this warning. We aren't sure how it got here, and we're certainly not going to let it leave. It's just too seductive, too shiny, and too easy. And after our tour, we can see that our technologies, our buildings, our spaces are formed from a planetary-scaled machine, an infrastructure so large that it has become invisible, a machine so often ignored, disguised or forgotten behind the gloss of the screen, the seamless aluminium edge, or the glare of the pixel. But in City Everywhere, ideology rarely evolves at the same pace as our technology. But from our taxi, if we can understand and can map these systems, then perhaps we can begin to reimagine them, to conjure new stories, new mythologies, and new technologies for a new city. And my watch tells me about a coffee machine it just met, and the city wraps us in a warm embrace, and the LEDs blink, and the cooling fans spin, and the streets are lined with sensors, and the electromagnetic hum, and it smells like it's gonna rain.
Everything will be smart, connected, and make it all better.
And our faces are bright in the rolling glow of a rectangular screen aurora.
In the future, everything will be smart, connected, and make it all better.
And in the future, everything will be smart, connected, and make it all better.
In the future, everything will be smart, connected, and make it all better.
And in the future, everything will be smart, connected, and make it all better.
In the future, everything will be smart, connected, and make it all better.
In the future, everything will be smart, connected, and make it all better.
In the future, everything will be smart, connected, and make it all better. In the future, everything will be smart, connected, and